Atleti are third favourites as it stands right now. Obviously, they've got that Copa del Rey game coming up with Barcelona, but they don't need to worry about the Champions League anymore. And when you actually look at their run in La Liga, most of the games that they've got left for the rest of this season are games that they should win. So, Craig, what chances are we giving them?
You say that, but since the winter break, they've lost to Leganés and Getafe, amongst others. So, you know, you can basically just chuck this out, because they've already shown us that in games where we think, right, that shouldn't be a problem, then it has been. So on paper, yes, but you've still got to go out and get the job done. And unfortunately, those two games in particular, those two winnable games, would have seen them. I can't remember the points difference they have at the moment to the top, but they'd have been top. Right, so the Leganés and Getafe game, they'd have been top. Now, Barca can argue and Real Madrid could argue, well, we dropped points there and we dropped points there. But there's no getting away from it. Those were games where, you know, most of us sat here and went, right, there's a three-pointer for Atleti, there's a three-pointer. So sometimes it just doesn't work out like that. I think the odds are pretty spot on. I think at the moment Barca look as if they're going to go on and win the title. But there's a good few hurdles to get over. And again, I say it, nobody really saw the loss of form coming going into the winter break, but it happened, and it kind of spiralled quite quickly for them. So that kind of thing can turn, particularly when the pressure gets cranked up. And obviously May 11th there's the Clásico at the Montjuic, so home advantage for them there. But again, what position are we going to be in going into that? Is it going to be like a 2 or 3 points, or is somebody already going to be 5 or 6 points ahead? We just don't know.
Alex, you've been nodding along there with what Craig had to say about Atleti in these upcoming games.
Yeah, I've got to say, I felt really quite sorry for them at the weekend, because I thought they played very well. You know, certainly for about 70 minutes. OK, they then conceded 4 goals. But I thought for most of the game, I thought they played really well and much better than I expected them to, given that it was coming off the back of being knocked out of the Champions League and the way that happened against Real Madrid. Another game in which I actually think they played really quite well. So I think I've been relatively impressed with them. But yeah, the results haven't been there. And like Craig said, they've had these slip-ups, especially the one against Getafe fairly recently. That was, you know, that's not a result that you can afford to get away with in a title race. I don't think they're out of it completely. I do think the Copa del Rey semi-final second leg against Barcelona is important, because I think getting knocked out of the cup as well, on top of the Champions League, on top of this result, that might be too much for them psychologically. But I don't think we can rule them out completely, because overall, like I say, I think they have been playing really well. Julian Alvarez has been great, Sorloth off the bench. Simeone's got a strong squad. And like I say, I think they've been doing pretty well. But when it's come to the crunch, admittedly, in the last week, with a bit of bad luck in that penalty shootout, with a very, very strange game, the way it played out in the last 20 minutes in La Liga, yeah, they haven't got over the line.
They did put that great run together, though, at the start, well, just after a slow start to the season. Yeah. Was it 15 games unbeaten or 15 wins? I can't remember, but it was a great streak. They started the season relatively slowly, if memory serves me right. It seems like a long time ago now. And you were thinking, because we talked about the squad before the season started and said, look, the squad is really beefy. Almost two starting 11s. So he had a lot to pick from. He made some big signings, you know, particularly Julian Alvarez, signed Conor Gallagher, who's sort of been in and out. And then they started the season a little bit, I think, poorly. And then they got this momentum and came like a train. If they can somehow harness that again and finish the season like that, they're going to be close. The big question again is, there's all these questions, but the big question again, can they put that run together that they did midway through that first half of the season that's going to propel them back right into the middle of this title race?
What they need need to happen is what happened just after the start of the season, when everybody wrote them off. Because basically we'd written them off. We were sitting talking about, is it going to be Barca, is it going to be Real Madrid? And so on the quiet, they managed to get themselves up, and all of a sudden, they're a point behind. Well, they've got an opportunity. But when the question was asked, they failed to deliver. And I don't think defensively they're as good as Atletico Madrid teams of the past. And I think that's as big a problem as any, because you can't rely on them right now, and you certainly can't rely on a team who only got to the top of the tree nearly because everybody had forgotten about them.
It's not a coincidence, I don't think, that their slow start to the season, Atleti, in comparison to others, coincided with Julian Alvarez taking a little bit of time, unsurprisingly, to fit in. Was on the bench quite a few times, got substituted off quite a few times, was partnered with Soloth, was partnered with Griezmann, and it was like, how's this going to work? And it's no surprise that once they worked it out, the Griezmann sort of Alvarez, and as Alex mentioned, Soloth, unfortunately for him, it's been coming off the bench for the most part. Once they figured out the balance and the understanding, and Alvarez and Griezmann, but particularly Alvarez, really hit form, then they were able to go in this great run. As long as if Griezmann stays fit and Alvarez stays fit, they possibly could do that. They're just in a position at the moment that makes it difficult because they're sort of one or two slip-ups away from taking themselves completely out of it. They don't really, because of those results, particularly the Getafe one recently, it means there's less room for error, and that's a much more difficult position to be in.
Yeah, the only question marks came in because he had that slightly slow start, but the goal scoring it's always been there, but it's steadily improved. The all-round performances have steadily improved as well. And I think now we're looking at pretty much the season that we expected him to have. Now, as always at Real Madrid, and as he has said time and time again, it's about trophies. It's not about goals. He said a couple of times now, he said the goals for him don't matter unless they're accompanied by trophies. And so that's what Real Madrid's all about. Let's see what happens in the Champions League, which is the big one, and the League and the Copa del Rey. Because talk about Barca going for a treble. Real Madrid, it's there for them as well, potentially. So, no, I think right now his season can be graded as good, and it will become very good or even great only if those goals are accompanied by trophies.
I don't wish to bust his bubble.
Okay.
I don't wish to bust Mbappe's bubble.
You going to?
But I don't think he is the most important player.
At Real Madrid.
I think Courtois is the most important player. They could win games without Mbappe right now, but they can't win games without Courtois. And as much as he's caught up, because what he's done in the last few months is he's caught up from that bad start, which is fantastic. But I don't think he's the most important player. Not right now.
I was sat here. Two of us were busting to get in, and I was just about to say you could look at the other end.
Right.
And it's not fancy and it's not flash, but if you take the Villarreal game for an example, the back four was makeshift at best. What was it? Tchouaméni, Asensio, was it Vasquez at the weekend? It wasn't Valverde, it was Lucas Vasquez at right back, and I think it might have been Fran Garcia at left back. So it was the makeshift back four. And away from home, at the fifth best team at the moment in La Liga, they got peppered in the first 15 minutes before those two goals from Kylian Mbappe. And so it took, another... And there was no world-class saves, but they were all solid saves that he made. But it takes having arguably the best keeper in the world, well, certainly in the top three, behind this makeshift defence, who are going to cough up some opportunities to keep you in the game, as Stevie said, to allow you to go and win it. And that is hugely important. And, the goals, of course the goals are important and they're flashy and they make the headlines. But when you've got somebody like that at the other end, Courtois, who can, a bit like Alisson did in Paris, you can't buy that, because Liverpool that night in Paris should have been battered. They should have went back to Liverpool on the plane, 4-0 down, maybe even 5. That's the difference a real top goalkeeper can make. So I'm with him. I think the other end is, at the moment, the most important position for Real Madrid.
So let me come back to both parties. Outfield players then, is he their most important right now?
Well, no, because if...
No, this is a silly... I really think this is a silly argument because... or a silly debate, and I'll tell you why.
They can win without him, right?
You can't have one player. You can't just single out one player, right? There is, and Alex touched on it there when he talked about it's not about goals, and according to Mbappe, it's about trophies. You can't win trophies with just one player. It takes a team effort, and everybody has an important role to play. So, is he the most important? Well, he's maybe the most important player, arguably with Vinicius Junior in the front line, but he's certainly not the most important when it comes to making tackles and playing passes. He's not the most important when it comes to winning headers or making saves. So my point is it's not going to take one person. It's like Barcelona. Lamine Yamal's not going to take them over the line on his own. Neither's Rafinha, neither's Lewandowski. It's going to be a team effort, and that's how it is. He may grab the headlines at the end of the season, Kylian Mbappe, But the most important thing is that all the facets of the team are operating properly.
Yes, and we just hope that Real Madrid are given the rest that Carlo Ancelotti has asked for, 72 hours between games. Javier Tebas has come back at this. It was fun to hear what the guys had to say about it at the weekend. Javier Tebas has said since European competitions began on Thursdays more than 14 years ago, clubs from all over Europe, including Spanish ones, have been playing on Sundays without 72 hours having passed. Now, yes, we have heard from the boys on this, Alex. It doesn't mean we don't want to again, but let me get your thoughts on this, because we're seeing this drama here between club and league on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true what Tebas says, in the sense that the clubs that suffer most from this are the clubs that play in the Europa League, in the Conference League in Spain this season. That's been Real Sociedad, Athletic Club, Betis, because of the way that the timings play out, playing on a Thursday night, and then you have to play on a Sunday or a Monday, I guess. They are consistently getting fewer than 72 hours rest. I think there's a lot of support for the Real Madrid's position that players aren't getting enough rest, that players are overworked, there are too many games in too many competitions, and this is having a detrimental effect on players' health and on performance as well, and that the spectacle is suffering as a result. I think everyone is pretty much united on that. The question is this approach from Madrid, which is coming out and sort of taking a step further and saying, we are not going to play a game in these circumstances again, taking quite a belligerent stance, albeit on a point of principle, and that some people might question. And the fact that, as I say, they're not the only ones. There are a number of teams who suffer in this way. And we wait to see what happens the next time that Madrid are in this position. They've got this short gap coming up between the Leganés game in La Liga and the Copa del Rey semi-final second leg that theoretically, unless kickoff times change, will be under 72 hours. So let's see if they stick to their guns on this. But I think there's pretty much universal agreement among clubs and among players and among coaches that the point of principle is correct. The question is how best to deal with it. But look, people have been complaining about this. Players have been complaining about this. Players' unions have complained about this for years, and nothing has happened. The situation hasn't got better. It's got worse. So yeah, maybe you can make the case that more radical action is required to force a change.
I've always been an advocate of there's just too many of supporting the position that, with this ludicrous Club World Cup and other stuff, and increasing, European Championship teams and increasing teams at World Cups, making more games, blah, blah, blah. I've got an issue with that. I don't ever remember, ever remember discussing the amount of hours between a game on a weekend and a game in midweek. Do you? Never. I don't ever remember anybody in the dressing room ever. I don't remember a dressing room at any of the clubs I played, and most of them were international footballers, so they were travelling around. They weren't getting much rest either. But I don't ever remember in 10 plus years a conversation where somebody went, "We've got 68 hours to the next game." Yeah. I just think it is. I think it has been embedded now in the minds of managers, players, and I think where it's coming from is sports science. Sports science is trying to tell players, rightly or wrongly, or tell coaches and players that they need X amount of rest to be at their peak condition. That's probably correct, but we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world that is driven by TV networks, TV contracts, TV slots, that everybody wants their piece of the pie. And that's very difficult. I get the crux of this argument. The crux of this argument, I think, isn't so much the 72 hours. The crux of it, for me, was they played on a Wednesday and a Saturday, and their biggest rivals played on a Tuesday and a Sunday. I think that's where this stems from.
It suited them. I'd be more inclined to listen and back Real Madrid up if they had turned round and said, we're going to look after our players, and so we're not going to take part in the Club World Cup. I would have been more impressed if they'd fought against that. Not just them, but all the other clubs. And I mean really fight against it by just saying, we are not playing. Because if we think that teams are tired and teams have got injuries, just you wait till the start of next season after this Club World Cup, it's going to be ridiculous. We're going to be complaining, but of course, Real Madrid, they're only interested in getting the money from it and winning the tournament so they can stick it on their wall, along with the other 1,000 that they've got. So I would be more impressed if they turned around and said, we're interested in our players, we're not playing in the Club World Cup. That would have made some sense to me.
Yeah, and